to the Muslims into a crossroads between the interior and the north of Africa. The Christian advance down the peninsula caused the flight of the population towards the cities situated in the south. The Medina of Ronda overflowed its demographic limits, and it was then that the old suburbs were formed, were walled in, and had the most famous baths in the city installed in them. Occupied by the baths is located next to the only entrance from the north to the old city of Ronda. Access was achieved through the La Puente gate, the only means of communication with the rest of Upper Andalusia, a fact which meant that the city looked towards this point and constructed here its main entrance as well as its most important defences. The location of the baths is not just chance. It was the custom to locate them at the entrance to the city because the area around the gates was one with a great movement of people where travellers could not only purify their bodies but also their souls, as there was a mosque next to the baths. To enter the baths, which were located outside the defensive walls, it was necessary to go through a small door. Once through, some stairs led up to the entrance door of the baths. Placed at the confluence of two rivers, the building was half underground in order to maintain the interior temperature better. By means of a small aqueduct, the water was brought to the baths from a water wheel. The water wheel, placed at the top of a tower, was turned thanks to the efforts of a donkey. The mechanism of the water wheel passed down through the interior of the tower to a level below that of the river, so that the water would flow into the interior and be collected and raised to the higher platform. The mechanism was simple. The circular movements of the donkey around the water wheel turned another wheel, which pulled a belt of ceramic containers called canquilones, which lifted the water to a channel which led the water to the aqueduct. The water brought by the aqueduct filled a water deposit in the woodshed, and from there it was distributed along ceramic channels called atanoles to the different parts of the baths. This room, which was dark and warm, housed the oven used to heat the baths. The wood, which was passed into the room through a small door, fed the oven continually. Through some openings, cold air penetrated into the interior of the oven, where it was immediately heated and circulated via an hypocausto under the first two rooms of the baths. In the first room, the water thrown on the floor evaporated because of the heat, creating a dense, humid atmosphere, In the next room, called the warm room, the heat diminished but was enough to create an agreeable atmosphere. Lastly, the air and smoke caused by the burning ended their journey in 2 chimneys set into the wall. The next rooms, now without heating, housed the cold baths, the reception, and the stairs giving access to the building. The baths were places for meeting, chatting, and resting, as well as places where the Muslim religion's requirement for hygiene and cleanliness could be fulfilled. People spent many hours in the baths, and there were sessions for women as well as for men. A large hall with a drinking fountain in the centre served as the reception. Wooden platforms around the side walls of the hall, covered with matting and cushions, were used as changing rooms and places to meet and chat. 4 great pillars supported a huge dome adorned with skylights. Sunlight shone through these to illuminate the hall. The session in the baths started in the hot room and ended in the cold one. The process was repeated several times. The cold room had 2 pools of cold water, one at each end of the room, which were fed by pipes set into the walls which carried the water from the water deposit in the woodshed to the pools. The warm room, which was the biggest in the building, was heated by the system of heated water which passed under the floor. In this room there were wooden benches with matting and cushions on the floor for resting, and tables where massages and other treatments with ointments and perfumes were performed. Recovered from ruins of the Roman era, supported by means of horseshoe arches, the 3 barrel vaults and the 6 domes which formed the ceiling. The last of the rooms, the first to be visited, was the hot room. Because it was just next to the boiler room, and thanks to the hot water system underneath, the temperature was high enough to evaporate water thrown on the floor and create a dense cloud of water vapor. In the wood room, and accessible through an opening in the wall at the end of the hot room, there was a small water fountain from which the water was collected to wet the floor and thus maintain the level of the steam in the room. This same system of baths has continued to be used throughout the centuries, right up to our times. It is a legacy of a people who lived in this peninsula for many centuries. It was their land, and in it they have left an imprint of their refinement, culture, art, and customs.